Life has a way of shifting roles between parents and their grown-up children. For years, you dedicate yourself to nurturing, guiding, and making sacrifices for them. Then, a day arrives when you sense a shift. Perhaps they disregard your advice, dismiss your viewpoints, speak condescendingly, or even worse, make you feel like a burden. And it stings. Should your children begin to treat you with less respect than you deserve, feelings of frustration, even anger, may arise. You might feel compelled to remind them of all you've done, the years spent prioritizing their needs. Yet the truth is, anger won't solve it. In fact, it often exacerbates the situation. Instead, a more effective approach exists to regain their respect without conflict, arguments, or bitterness. Today, I'm going to share 6 actionable steps to take when your children show a lack of respect. These are impactful adjustments, subtle changes in your reactions that can fundamentally alter their perception of you. Some may catch you off guard, but if you stick around until the end, you'll discover how to reclaim your position as a respected and valued figure in their lives. Let's dive in. Step 1. Cease seeking their approval. One common mistake parents make, particularly as they age, is trying too hard to please their children. Perhaps you've recognized this tendency in yourself. You go above and beyond to accommodate them. You agree when you'd rather decline. You prioritize their needs over your own, hoping that by doing enough, they'll appreciate you more. However, the harsh reality is, the more you pursue their approval, the less respect they'll have for you. Respect isn't earned through self-sacrifice. It's earned through self-respect. If you're constantly bending over backward, always yielding, and constantly striving to maintain harmony, you're essentially teaching them that your feelings are secondary. And once they adopt that belief, it becomes easy for them to take you for granted. I once knew a gentleman named Arthur, a robust, independent man in his younger years. But as he aged, he gradually allowed his children to dictate all the decisions. He adjusted his schedule to accommodate their needs, suppressed his own opinions, and even overlooked their disrespectful tone. "I just want to keep the family united," he once confided in me. But what ensued? His children ceased to value him. They perceived him as someone who would always adapt, always consent, always remain silent. He believed he was preserving peace, but in reality, he was forfeiting his voice. If your children exhibit a lack of respect, the initial step isn't to demand it. It's to stop acting as though you require it. Establish boundaries. Decline when necessary. Voice your opinions, even if they disagree. Because the moment you start respecting yourself, they'll begin to perceive you differently, and in due course, that respect will reciprocate. Step 2. Lead by example. Don't argue. When your children brush aside your thoughts, interrupt you, or generally disrespect you, your initial reaction might be to argue. Remind them of your past efforts and demand their attention. But let me share something that could save you years of trouble. Arguing rarely succeeds. Consider this. When was the last instance you persuaded someone to respect you through confrontation? Respect isn't obtained through verbal disputes. It's earned through presence, your demeanor, and your reactions when others challenge your patience. If you respond to disrespect with anger, you're only reinforcing their existing belief that they have control over you. I once knew a woman named Patricia, a retired nurse who had dedicated her life to caring for others. However, at home, her grown-up children had begun treating her like an afterthought. They overlooked her counsel, dismissed her worries, and occasionally even ridiculed her when she tried to correct them. Initially, she retaliated with arguments, trying to prove she still warranted their respect. Yet, the more she fought, the worse the situation became. Then, one day, Patricia changed her approach. Instead of arguing, she began listening, truly listening. She stopped pursuing respect through words and instead carried herself with dignity like someone who already possessed it. She spoke calmly, with wisdom, without the need to win. And gradually, her children began to take note. They observed a woman who wasn't desperate for their approval, who didn't need to prove herself, who simply exuded strength. If your children disrespect you, don't engage in battles for it. Demonstrate what respect looks like by how you treat yourself. Maintain your dignity, speak confidently, and most importantly, never stoop to their level. Because when you stand your ground with grace, they will sense it, and eventually they'll emulate your example. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's move forward. Step 3. Lessen your emotional reliance. One of life's toughest lessons as you age is realizing you can't rely on your children for emotional contentment. You may love them deeply, and you may crave their love and respect in return, but the moment they perceive that you need them to feel valued, the power dynamic shifts in the relationship. Here's the reality. People, including your own children, respect those who are emotionally self-sufficient. When you depend on them for validation, affection, or attention, it puts a strain on them, and instead of feeling grateful, they start feeling burdened. They might withdraw, become impatient, or even irritated, and the more you seek their love, the less freely they offer it. I once knew a man named Charles, a kind-hearted father who had dedicated everything to his children. As they matured and became busy with their own lives, he found himself constantly awaiting their calls. When they didn't call, he would call them instead, often excessively. He reminded them how much he missed them and wished they would visit more, but instead of strengthening their bond, it drove them further away. They began viewing his calls as obligations rather than something they looked forward to. Then, one day, Charles did something different. He stopped waiting and initiating calls. Instead, he started prioritizing himself, exploring new hobbies, socializing with friends, and taking care of his own happiness. And something unexpected occurred. His children began calling more frequently. They started respecting his time, seeing him as someone with a fulfilling life of his own. The lesson is straightforward. The less you rely on your children to make you feel valued, the more they will begin to appreciate your presence. When you demonstrate that you can stand strong on your own, they will start respecting you, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely admire the life you've created for yourself. Step 4. Establish boundaries and enforce them. One of the primary reasons children lose respect for their parents is because the parents allow it. If you permit your children to speak disrespectfully, disregard your opinions, or treat you as if your time and feelings are unimportant, they will continue to do so. Not because they are inherently bad people, but because individuals, especially family members, will always treat you according to what you tolerate. Setting boundaries doesn't mean severing ties with your children or creating conflict. It involves calmly and firmly deciding what behaviors you will and will not accept. And, more importantly, it means upholding those boundaries when they are crossed. I recall a woman named Elizabeth, a retired accountant, who had spent her career managing finances with precision and confidence. However, when it came to her adult children, she struggled. They interrupted her mid-sentence, disregarded her concerns, and even criticized her lifestyle choices. Initially, she tolerated it, telling herself it wasn't worth the argument. But over time, she realized that with each instance of silence, she was teaching them that their behavior was acceptable. So, one day, Elizabeth altered her approach. When her daughter interrupted her, she calmly stated, "I'll resume speaking when you're ready to listen." When her son dismissed her opinion, she simply responded, "You don't have to agree with me, but I expect you to respect me." And when they persisted in pushing her limits, she made it clear. If they couldn't treat her with basic respect, she wouldn't spend time with them. And you know what ensued? They began to listen. Initially, they resisted, but over time, they realized their mother wasn't relenting. They saw that she valued herself enough to demand respect, and as a result, they started giving it to her. If your children disrespect you, it's time to assess. Are you enabling it? Because if you don't set boundaries, they won't establish them for you. And if you don't advocate for yourself, no one else will. Step 5. Discontinue unappreciated giving. One of the quickest ways to erode respect is to continually give to those who don't value it. And as parents, we often do this more than we realize. We offer our time, energy, and support, even when it goes unacknowledged, is taken for granted, or is met with entitlement. But here's the reality. Giving to someone who doesn't appreciate it doesn't cultivate love or respect. It cultivates expectation. They stop viewing your kindness as something valuable and start seeing it as something they're entitled to. And the moment you stop, they don't feel grateful. They feel inconvenienced. I once knew a woman named Irene, a mother who had always been generous with her children. She helped them financially whenever they needed it, dropped everything to assist them, and even rearranged her life to accommodate their needs. But instead of gratitude, she was met with complaints. They didn't express thanks. They expected more. And the worst part, when she finally needed their help, they were too busy. Then, one day, Irene made a change. She stopped overextending herself. She stopped offering help before it was even requested. And most importantly, she started declining when necessary. Initially, her children were frustrated. They didn't understand why she wasn't bending over backward for them anymore. But over time, something shifted. They started valuing her time. They started appreciating her efforts, because suddenly they realized that her generosity wasn't unlimited. It was a gift, not a guarantee. If you feel like your children don't respect your time, effort, or kindness, take a step back. Ask yourself, are you giving more than you should? And if so, what would happen if you stopped? Because when you teach people that your generosity is conditional on respect, they will start treating it that way. Step 6. Cultivate a life independent of them. One of the most effective ways to regain your children's respect is to demonstrate that your happiness isn't solely dependent on them. As parents, it's natural to dedicate ourselves to our children, making them the focal point of our lives. But as we age, that dynamic shifts, and if you've spent your entire life prioritizing them, they may start perceiving you as someone who has nothing else going on. People respect those who have their own purpose, interests, and sense of fulfillment, and if your children see that you rely on them for entertainment, validation, or meaning, they might start feeling suffocated, or worse, they might start seeing you as someone with no life of their own. I knew a man named Walter, a widower in his late 60s. After his wife's passing, he poured everything into his children's lives, constantly checking in, offering unsolicited advice, and expecting them to fill the void his wife had left. But instead of drawing them closer, it pushed them away. They visited less, their calls became shorter, and Walter felt more alone than ever. Then he made a choice. He joined a hiking club, he started volunteering at a local animal shelter, and he enrolled in a pottery class. He stopped making his children the center of his world. And something remarkable happened. His children started reaching out more frequently. They were curious about his activities. They admired his independence. They respected him. If your children don't respect you, ask yourself, do they see you as someone with a full, meaningful life, or do they see you as someone waiting around for their attention? Because when you show them that you are living, not just existing, they will start seeing you in a completely different light. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 6 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Concluding thoughts. Respect isn't something you can demand from your children. It's something you inspire through your demeanor, the boundaries you set, and the way you live your life. If they have started treating you with less care, consideration, or respect, don't waste your energy on anger. Instead, adjust your approach. Stop chasing their approval, because the less you need it, the more they'll offer it. Lead by example, because your dignity speaks louder than your words. Lessen your emotional reliance, because the more self-sufficient you are, the more they'll respect your presence. Set boundaries, because people will only treat you as well as you require them to. Discontinue unappreciated giving, because when generosity is taken for granted, it loses its value. And most importantly, cultivate a life independent of them, because people respect those who have their own purpose, joy, and sense of fulfillment. If you do these things, something incredible will happen. Your children will start seeing you in a different light, not as someone waiting for their attention, but as someone who commands respect simply by being who they are. And in time, that respect will reciprocate, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.